All right. So I can't remember. Did you say you wanted to introduce this idea? Or do you want me to?
Well, do you want to introduce what we're actually doing?
Well, at this point, everyone out there listening to the sultry sounds of Mark's and my voice, we are well into the dreamscape that is the movie Waking Life. And in this scene, we have a college class. I'm assuming it's a college class because the young man is in his early 20s, probably. He's in the classroom. You'll see him. I don't know if I'll maybe point him out to you, but so this is a dream sequence, and basically he's going to be breaking down this cultural analysis, and
it's all in the past tense as well. So he's speaking about things that have changed or been done in the recent past.
do you think that it has any motivation for the present?
Well, it's open to interpretation. That I think it's within the recent past that the music that is shown,
Mm-hmm.
as well as sort of the black and white imagery of what looks to be sort of a Soviet satellite state, whether it be Poland or East Germany in the 1960s or 50s.
Mm-hmm.
But press play and let's let the audience to see what we're talking about.
Okay.
Our critique began as all critiques begin, with doubt. Doubt became our narrative. Ours was a quest for a new story, our own. And we grasped toward this new history driven by the suspicion that ordinary language couldn't tell it.
So I'm going to stop there.
Yeah.
So he starts there with a man that's running away and he's from something that he's frightened of, and he's looking over his shoulder at whatever the threat is. I think that's a reference to the dream that we all have, where we're being chased by something that never actually catches us, but it is a very fearful and frustrating dream.
Yeah, it is that nightmarish kind of experience where it's silent. I don't know if you've ever had a silent dream. Have you ever had a silent dream? Like where there's no noise at all.
I can't say I've ever differentiated between noise and silence.
That's interesting because I just had an epiphany. So this is going to be a little bit of a segue, everyone, and Mark. So in my past, I grew up in a family that was divorced. And I remember as a very small child, and I would have to say I could, have to ask my mom like how old I was when we lived at this particular house, because I have certain very, very young memories of being in that house. I had an earache in this house. I remember screaming and crying because of the pain in my ear and my mom trying to comfort me. I remember taking baths, listening to Sesame Street and Bert and Ernie and Big Bird. Like I have vivid memories. The street we lived on was Magnolia, and the street was lined with magnolia trees. And then we were just a few blocks away from the hospital where I was born. So I have all of these really vivid memories of this place. But the one negative thing about that experience, I had this recurring nightmare that was noise and silence. And by that, I mean, and I wrote a poem about this or some kind of short story or whatever, but by that, I meant the silence was so deafening.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was just palpable. It was just compressed all around me. So basically in my dream that was a recurring nightmare, I would be walking around the house looking for my mom and I couldn't find her. And it was nothing but just void in terms of the sound. It was just void, but I'm walking from room to room. And then there was even hues and changes, and I felt like something was angry with me. Something was mad at me, and I didn't know why, and I didn't know how to change it. And it was just this crushing anxiety. Mm-hmm. So, all of a sudden right now in this, I now can, for me, relate to what noise and silence is, if this is almost like a nightmarish scene. But as part of a bigger picture of waking life, I'm going to try to suggest that each of these scenes is almost like an expression of what's already come in the movie if you're paying attention. So the movie's already talked about this in its own way, and then it's showing you an episode of it in the dream. It's really interesting because I came across another scene at the end of the movie, and what happened at that part is actually mentioned earlier as an idea. So this idea was brought up in some discussion before, and then we see it in a dream later on. And if you only watch the movie one time, you're not going to catch it. It's just not going to be there for you. But so yeah, I think that you're right. This cultural expression, this man here is the embodiment of a cultural identity that's running away from the past, and it's looking for his own voice to express his own existential crisis. I have felt such a deep connection with this movie that it's almost like the Bible. When people say, I just read the Bible all the time, and it just shows me new things. And that's what it's like for me when I watch this. Like I see.
So the whole thing is like a jigsaw puzzle. It's sort of fitting into place. Yeah.
Yeah.
Doubt became our narrative. Ours was a quest for a new story.
Okay, so ours was a quest for a new story. Doubt became our narrative, and then he said this whole thing began with doubt. So you come to a point where you look at what you were taught, you look at what you were told. This is the way life is, and then something in your own experience, you're like, this isn't the way it's supposed to be. There's got to be a different story out there.
Yeah.
Or I've got to find my place in the story that my parents found their place. But my parents is like you said in our discussion before with your parents, and then how your kids, experience you.
Yeah. What was that? The idea that my mum and dad were born in 1938, and to me, that's so remote. I can't imagine life before me. And yet they existed. And I was born in 1960, and everything's in color. But when I think about my mum and dad, it's sort of through a black and white movie. There's no color, there's no smells, there's no experience of it. And then I'm thinking that my own kids now must be thinking, well, he's really old. He was born in 1960. That is so remote from their personal experience.
Right. Yeah.
And we grasped toward this new history driven by the suspicion that ordinary language couldn't tell it.
Okay, so now ordinary language couldn't tell it, and then it switches to this scene. Because this is a language here. Music. Right? And each generation has its own, the Rolling Stones, the Beatles, Buddy Holly, Elvis, Ella Fitzgerald, whatever. You have those voices, but this voice here is chaos, or at least it's ordered chaos. Anarchy.
Our past appeared frozen in the distance.
Our past appeared frozen in the distance. What do you think that means? Our past appeared frozen in the distance.
It's gone. It's of no relevance anymore. It's
a picture on the wall.
Yeah, that's right. Or a photograph. Or somebody trying to explain how they enjoyed Buddy Holly.
And our every gesture and accent signified the negation of the old world. And
I wanted to get back right there where he was flipping off. There he goes. So they're saying F you to the establishment. They're talking about. I mean, what did they talk about? I never got into the punk scene. So what were they? What was their beef?
Well, I personally experienced this. The punk scene happened in 76, 77, and that I was 16, 17 at the time. Up to that point, we had very technical music, prog rock like Genesis, Pink Floyd. To be anything in the music industry, you'd have had to have gone to Oxford or Cambridge to study music. All those brilliant bands came out of that sort of era, going through university. I was bored stiff with it. And then just briefly we had the Saturday Night Fever disco era, which was awful. The Bee Gees, I hated the Bee Gees. And then out of nowhere came the punk scene, and it was so refreshing. It was kids that hadn't been to music school. They could hardly play a chord. They were angry. Obviously, there was something in the background controlling it. Like Malcolm McLaren wasn't stupid. But we had the Sex Pistols.
Who's that?
He was the manager of the Sex Pistols.
Okay.
And then we had like the Clash and the Damned, the Jam, Stranglers, Elvis Costello, and it was so refreshing, and I loved that era.